Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz trumpeter and composer Charli Porter. He talked about his latest self-titled 2018 CD, and he has degrees from the Juilliard School and Manhattan School of Music, and following in the footsteps of his mentor, he has delved into many projects from jazz and classical to Arabic, Indian, African, Australian, Aboriginal, and Korean music, seeking to find common ground amongst all good music and avoiding the pigeon holdings of being labeled as a mere jazz or classical musician. He has gigged with the greats like Paquito D'Rivera, Charli Persip, and Chuck Israels, and he has great stories to back all of it up. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Let me start off here by saying thank you for taking a minute out to Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Oh, man, it's my pleasure.
And let's go ahead and dive into your latest album called Charli Porter. And I want to know, what was the artistic vision behind this album?
Basically, I hadn't done an album yet, except for being on many others as a sideman. So this was really intended to kind of showcase what I do as a trumpeter and composer, and to some extent kind of serve as an introduction, on record to the music community of, like, what I do.
How do you view recordings? Are they an imprint for you in time, or how do you view these projects that you get involved with? Are they a part of an evolution of your playing?
If you're recording stuff that you've written yourself, then I feel like, in a way, it is definitely kind of similar to when you write in a diary and you're kind of just putting your thoughts down to have them somewhere where you can reflect on them later. Having a recording, in a way, kind of allows me, both as a trumpet player, I'm measuring kind of where I am right now. That's saying, hey, this is where I am, and we can always get better, right? But as a composer, it's also documenting also where I am at that time, and kind of working, in a sense, as my diary, and allowing me to let these ideas out so that I can just make room for all the new ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So where were you born and raised?
Boynton Beach, Florida.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah, I grew up there for 18 years and then moved to New York. I couldn't wait to get out of the heat. I think my body was built for a colder climate.
I hear you.
I like to tell people I sweated basically for 18 years straight.
So, give me an idea of, like, your childhood and growing up and how you got involved not only with music but with jazz.
Well, it started off basically, I think I was always inclined towards music, but I never had an outlet for it. My first inkling into getting into music and just listening to a lot of music wasn't jazz, but it was, I guess my mom listened to a lot of different music. I got a lot of variety from what she would check out. She'd be listening to everything from the Patsy Cline to the Beach Boys to Def Leppard to Motley Crue. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff playing in the house, so I got kind of a big dose of that, and of course Led Zeppelin and some other really cool bands, Queen. But then I remember one day I discovered a recording of Metallica, and believe it or not, that was one of the things that really got me into music to start with, was listening to the album Master of Puppets. But from there, actually, my grandma, she took me to my first big concert, which was to see Wynton at the Carefree Theater. I guess I should tell you how I started playing the trumpet, which that came about actually as a choice of either, you're in sixth grade, either you need to play football or you need to pick an instrument. So my grandma, being a big fan of jazz, and I'll talk about her too because she was instrumental in me getting into jazz music, she was a big fan of Louis Armstrong and Harry James and all these guys, famous trumpeters. So she said, you're playing the trumpet. And she kind of made the decision for me. But fast forward 3 months later, she took me to my first big concert, and that was Wynton Marsalis playing at the Carefree Theater. And that was just life-changing. Took me backstage, and from that moment on, I knew I basically wanted to play music.
You did actually, at Juilliard, study with Wynton, correct?
Yeah. Now, technically, Wynton, his name was on the roster. And the whole reason I wanted to go there was to be close to him and to be able to take lessons with him. But technically, he didn't actually teach through the school. So I studied with him on the side, but I was there every week or every other week. Basically, any time that he had time, I would be coming by. Sometimes it'd be twice a week, 3 times a week. And then I had my regular teacher that was, assigned to me through the school. But nobody officially studied with Wynton at the time. That just wasn't an option. But it was nice to have his name on the roster. It attracted people. That's what I gathered
Sure.
from it anyway. But I had kept in touch with him since I was 13, and I knew as soon as I got up there, I would be knocking on his door, which I did. And yeah, there was just a lot of really valuable stuff I got from studying with Wynton, conceptualizing music and practicing in a different way, not just being assigned something, but knowing why you're doing it and really having a certain system of values set inside of that pursuit. You know, understanding the compositions that you play from a composer's perspective, which a lot of trumpet players, they don't dive that deep, especially classical trumpet players. Relating also to complex and things in life with ordinary kind of analogous thinking, you know. Like I remember Wynton talking about taking a breath, and the way he taught me how to take a breath was he said, he asked me a question. He said, what's the most important part of painting a house? And then the answer to that question was seeing the house painted in your mind ahead of time. And then the analogy was that forethought of seeing the house painted was the breath that you take before you play the note on the trumpet. And that's pretty deep if you think about it. The breath itself is a reflection of the sound before you even play a note. Just like a painter is going to see something before they even put the stroke to the paper or to the whatever they're painting.
Absolutely.
In your mind's eye.
Yeah, without a doubt. So along with, you know, having good instruction and good teachers, you've traveled quite a bit around the world. What do you learn about presenting jazz to other cultures?
Number one, I think kind of the backbone of my approach has always been that there's only two types of music. There's good and bad music, as Duke Ellington once said. And I feel like jazz music, what we call jazz music, improvised music, because there's all kinds of improvised music, and jazz kind of, I feel is in a way a sponge musically, that it kind of soaks up anything it comes in contact with it. And it's very inclusive in that regard. So because of that nature, I feel like anywhere we would go, whether it was Africa or India or China, you know, or Korea, there's always the potential for somebody to contribute what it is that they do into the music, into the fold of that music. You know what I mean? So that's what I think allows us to have some commonality and some bonding musically. Whereas if I was just trying to play some, say, Carnatic Indian music, which actually there's no way I could play it without having a certain degree of training, you know? And it's not to say that people don't have to have some kind of degree of training to be able to play, say, on a blues, right? But it's a different kind of thing. You literally have to study for years and years and years to do certain types of music. Whereas if you learn at least just a few fundamental things, then you can already start to join in on the conversation on a 12-bar blues. You know, that's the beauty of it, is that you don't have to be able to play these specific notes and these specific rhythms at this exact specific time, right? But you just have to maybe know a little bit of the framework, and then also just take a chance. And that's really what this music is about. Is it's about expressing, at least in my opinion, it's about finding you and expressing yourself and taking a chance. You can't be too safe when you're doing this.
So early on in your life, when you saw live jazz shows, which ones were really instrumental that really kind of left a big impression on you?
I guess I mentioned one of those because that concert that I saw at the Carefree Theater, and I remember the date, February 18th, 1992. So that changed my life and made me want to play music, but it also set the bar really high. And then seeing him again, 1996 at Smalls in New York City when I was living there. I just moved there. That was also kind of a revelation, just to know that music making, especially as a trumpet player, could happen on such a high level. But, you know, it's not just Wynton that's been a big influence. I've also been really influenced by Clark Terry and a lot of other great players. And I remember a concert that my grandmother took me to, which featured, it was a multiple bill concert in Florida that featured Clark Terry, Harry Sweets Ederson, Frank Foster, the Count Basie Orchestra, the Duke Ellington Orchestra, Cab Calloway. There were so many people in this one concert. It's pretty amazing to think that even happened and that I was there and got to go backstage and meet everybody, you know, like my grandma, she was willing to break the rules for me. What I mean is, you know, even if I wasn't supposed to go backstage, she would find a way to make it happen. She would just grab me by the hand and she'd say, we're going backstage. We're going to meet these people, you know, and that's always, I think, an easier thing to do at a jazz concert because generally speaking, all the jazz musicians I've met are very friendly, and they want to share a couple of words with you, and they know that the young people that are trying to get, playing this music, that are interested in it, that they're worth spending a little time with, because it makes a big impact and it keeps the music alive.
Let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of who you are, or a version of who they think you are, your family, your friends, and your fans, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
I'm not sure that you know yourself best. You have to spend every waking hour with yourself. And sometimes you don't understand something unless you can get away from it a little bit. Having an outside perspective, I think you have to rely on people's outside perspective a little bit to help you realize who you are. You know what I mean? And I suppose I'm still figuring that one out, to be honest. I'm not sure I'll ever know exactly, but I think music is definitely the conduit for conveying the answer to that question. Every day I practice and write and perform kind of brings me closer to an answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's a very fresh perspective and kind of gets to the heart, the essence of things. Charli, that's really, thank you for opening up about the album. Thank you for opening up about your world of music. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Portland, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Charli for his time and all that music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.